Chapter 131 Space Blade's Toughness, Transcendent Grade Earth Attribute Talent. About 50,000 miles away from the large base of the Golden Age in a small wilderness. Chuemo looked at this information in his hand and said softly. This is the location where that Class 6 fierce beast was found. According to the information given by Emo Shanshan, this ferocious beast was called the Recluse Lizard. The reason why they were able to discover this Class 6 fierce beast was because the Merchant Alliance's merchant fleet had a sudden encounter with it on their way to the Luoyang base, resulting in the loss of a lot of manpower and goods. According to the Merchant Alliance's speculation, this Class 6 fierce beast should have just migrated from somewhere else and was preparing to settle here. A Rank 6 Recluse Lizard, I think it should possess a high Earth attribute talent. If I can collect it, it will make my defense even stronger. Maybe even the attacks of the 8 desolate exalted ones won't be able to break through my defense. With that thought, Chuemo decided to go over and cut him down. I'll take this mission. Chummer said directly. The recluse lizard's skin is thick and fleshy, it's usually hard for martial artists of the same rank to deal with it, and basically they will all avoid it from a distance. Chumo, can you do it alone? Do you want me to invite out the family's old ancestor and go over with you? Hearing Chumo's words, Emo Shanshan said with some worry. No, I'm good enough to do it alone. Chuemo waved his hand and said confidently. Of course he couldn't let the Mo clan's oldest ancestor follow, or else it wouldn't be good to collect the talent. Alright then, you must be careful then. Emo Shanshan admonished. Don't worry, I'll be back soon. After accepting this mission, Chuemo directly left the headquarters of the Merchant Alliance, and after making a trip home to speak with Chen Shiwei, he then headed towards the outside of the base. Fresh. The golden-winged rock rocked up and disappeared into the clouds. Weaving through the broken clouds along the way, he soon brought Chuemo to the small wasteland outside the large base of Jinling. Although it was recorded in the intelligence that this was a small wilderness, it was actually only relative. The actual area of this place also has thousands of miles, put before the great change of heaven and earth. It is also a very huge uninhabited desert to go. When he raised his eyes, he saw that the place was filled with desert, and few green plants could be seen. Some of the ferocious beasts that lived in the desert, such as snakes, scorpions, and other creatures, could be found everywhere here. They are all low grade though. Upon sensing the powerful aura emanating from Chumo's body, they all fled. Chuemo didn't bother with them either, but instead spread out his spiritual power, covering an area of tens of miles in a radius and probing around. With his speed, it would only take an hour to search all of this wilderness. So, he quickly found the location of the recluse lizard. Within a slightly concave desert rocky area, Chuemo saw a huge lizard with a very large body, tens of meters long. It was definitely that Class 6 inferior fierce beast, the transported lizard. And around it, there were dozens of lizards that were significantly smaller in size gathered. The strengths were all between level 4 and 5 as well. It seems that this level 6 recluse lizard didn't just migrate alone, but brought its own colony with it. Chummer murmured. Although this was slightly different from what was recorded on the intelligence, it didn't hinder Chuemo too much. To this day. With his strength, Class 4 and Class 5 ferocious beasts no longer posed any threat to him. Without the slightest hesitation, Chuemo directly turned on his wind attribute talent and charged towards the recluse lizard. Roar! Just as Chumo was rapidly approaching, the recluse lizard also sensed Chumo's aura and was immediately startled, hissing loudly. The dozens of lizards around him were agitated as well, scurrying around and kicking up large swaths of sand and dust. Ho ho ho! At this time, Chuemo had already arrived nearby, and the recluse lizard spotted Chumo's figure and immediately commanded its subordinate colony to surround and kill the small cricket that dared to rush in. However, chop! Chuemo drew his sword out of its sheath with a clang sound, and the gale-robbing thunder blade was directly exerted, as his entire person transformed into a hurricane and rushed in. With a flash of blade light, a head of lizards was cut down by the long blade before it could even get close, falling on the spot and setting off a large shower of blood. These low-level lizards were simply unable to bring the slightest hindrance to Chumo. It didn't even have the ability to stop his body in the slightest. The time of the punch. Chumo's body fun, divided by G, rushed straight toward the recluse lizard. Roar. Seeing that Chumo had decimated a large portion of his own group, this level 6 recluse lizard was completely enraged. Only to see him roar, a huge sound wave directly swept out, lifting all the surrounding gravel, like a blistering wind and rain, shooting out towards Chumo. Instantaneous. Chumo executed his spatial talent, and his entire body instantly disappeared into the void, appearing in front of the recluse lizard at almost the same time, and then chopped down with a blade. Clang! It was accompanied by a sound of gold and iron clashing. Chumo felt as if his long knife had chopped on a piece of hard steel, only leaving a tiny white spot on the lizard's body. This caused a flash of surprise to appear in his eyes. Just now, even though what he had executed was only the gale-robbing thunder blade, with his current physical strength, coupled with the 50% increase in blade intent, his strength was also extremely terrifying. Even if an ordinary 8 desolate exalt was slashed, he would be seriously injured and bleeding. But the recluse lizard didn't even have any wounds. What a strong defense! Chumo thought darkly. He then directly executed the Shantian battling blade slash again, while his strength was in full swing, his chi and blood were running wildly, and his yuan power was stirring like a volcano, and under the 200 times increase, he directly slashed out with a single slash. Pfft! This time, the autumn killing blade finally slashed into the recluse lizard's flesh smoothly. But the wound inflicted wasn't too big, leaving only a half-meter long, 10-centimeter deep incision. It was a bit insignificant compared to the recluse's massive body. Seeing such a strong defense, instead of losing any ground, Chumo was even happier. The stronger the recluse lizard's defense was, the stronger its earth attribute talent was. The better the talent Chumo could obtain after he had beheaded it, the better it would be. It's hard to kill it with a single slash just by blade technique, unless a little bit of consumption is involved. But that's too much trouble. And didn't have to. As Chumo thought about it, he decided to use the space blade that had yet to truly test its power. In the meantime, because the wounds made by Chumo's slash also made the recluse lizard feel the pain. It did not expect that it would be injured by a tiny mole cricket, and immediately became completely furious. Ho ho ho! A huge roar that boomed out, and the entire earth shook with it. Chumo could feel that the wasteland on the ground seemed to be collapsing, and there was a suction force coming from it, pulling his legs towards the ground. This recluse lizard, would he pull him into the ground, relying on the power of the earth to squeeze him to death? Chumo's eyes stared, and without hesitation, he cast his spatial talent, after which his body appeared in midair. Spin. With just a wave of his palm, dense spatial power converged towards his vicinity from all directions. Eventually, it gradually formed a spatial blade that was difficult to see with the naked eye. Go! Chumo did not hesitate and directly swung his arm, and the space blade charged directly towards the recluse lizard. Instantaneous. A black crack appeared on the back of the recluse lizard, and a large amount of red blood splashed from the crack, just like a red-colored fountain. Whew! Such a wound instantly caused the recluse lizard to suffer serious injuries, and the intense pain caused it to resist rolling on the ground. Looking at such tremendous power of the space blade made Chumo immediately light up, then waved his hand again and condensed a space blade out. Pfft! Another strike came out towards the recluse lizard's neck. The recluse lizard sensed the danger and subconsciously twisted its head, narrowly avoiding it. Still, the spatial blade sliced into its tail and snapped directly with it. The pain of the broken tail made the recluse lizard finally perceive that the human in front of him was not to be messed with. More importantly, he felt a threat of death. And so, watching Chumo condense a space blade again, a flash of fear appeared in its eyes, and it even directly wailed, then turned its head and directly disappeared, intending to flee. Trying to escape? Chumo's other hand nestled gently. Buzz. An invisible ripple escaped, and wherever it passed, space instantly froze. The recluse lizard even felt, with the ripples swept through, originally in its heart can easily break open the earth, at this moment is actually steeply thick up, so that it is not able to break open the earth for a time. It became very difficult for it to even move and breathe. This was clearly another ability of the spatial talent, spatial lock. Roar. The recluse lizard's body struggled to escape, but it simply couldn't do so, and a look of despair appeared in its eyes. At this point, Chumo threw the third space blade out. The recluse lizard watched as the black crack appeared at its neck and easily decapitated its head. Phew. Only after doing this did Chumo let out a light sigh of relief. Lowering his form, he came to the corpse of the recluse lizard. Gather. Without the slightest hesitation, Chumo stretched out his palm and said softly. Capture successful. Gaining a transcendental level Earth attribute talent. Is it fused? Surprisingly, it was a transcendent level Earth attribute talent. A flash of surprise appeared in Chumo's eyes, but then he was relieved. If it wasn't for the transcendent level talent, this recluse lizard wouldn't have been able to block his Shan Tian battling slash by relying on defense alone. Fusion. Chumo said with some excitement. This was a transcendent level talent, and if it was fused, what kind of terrifying defense increase would it give him? Thinking so. Next moment. A sharp pain then surged in from the depths of the Yuan Shen, spreading to all parts of his body. Chumo clenched his teeth and held on to his patience. Bean-sized beads of sweat continued to drip down from his forehead, soon soaking the wasteland beneath him. If Chumo wasn't a martial artist, I'm afraid he would have already died of dehydration. A few moments later, the pain finally eased away. This also meant that his talent had fused successfully. After recovering for a moment, Chumo first checked his talent. Chapter 132 50-fold defense increase. Target, Chumhum. Physique, Transcendental Undying Thunder Body. Talents, Transcendent Level Fire Attribute Talent, Transcendent Level Earth Attribute Talent, Top Wind Attribute Talent, High Spatial Talent, High Blade Cultivation Talent, High Wood Attribute Talent, High Water Attribute Talent, High Dark Attribute Talent, Medium Metallic Talent. A second Transcendent Level Sky, try to see how much defense increase it gives me. Chumo operated his Transcendent Level Earth Attribute Talent, and immediately, he took out his Autumn Killing Blade and slashed towards his arm. Clang! A sound of gold and iron meeting came steeply, and Chumo then felt to discover that the area cut by the Autumn Killing Blade left a shallow white mark, which then disappeared. Trummer began to use the power increase starting at 10 times, he kept chopping at his arm with the Autumn Killing Blade. It still only left a shallow white mark. Subsequently, 30 times. 40 times. Chumo had been experimenting up to 150 times increase before he could feel the Autumn Killing Blade smoothly cut through the skin, leaving a wound. 50 times the increase in defense. Chumo tested out the results and a look of surprise appeared on his face. A 50-fold increase in defense made it so that Chumo would need to increase his strength by at least 150 times in order to inflict damage, and with his current physical strength, it would be equal to being able to withstand the strength of 1.5 million elephants. This was already damage that no ordinary 8 Desolate Exalted could deal. In other words, nowadays, with his defense, if he operated his Earth Attribute Talent, even an ordinary 8 Desolate Exalted would not be able to inflict damage on him. My strength, once again, has greatly increased. A smile appeared on Chumo's face. He then collected some more, and after obtaining a portion of Class 6 Fierce Beast Essence blood from the recluse lizard, he couldn't collect any more. You can go back. Thinking so, Chumo intended to leave. Summoning the Sky Rock to come down, he then stood on its back, accompanied by a light chirp from the Sky Rock. He lifted himself up and flew in the direction of the large base in Jinling. Soon, Chumo had then arrived outside the large base of Jinling. He was about to enter the city, but suddenly realized that at the gate, there was a familiar figure. Chase the wind. Chumo was a bit surprised. He didn't expect the other party to come here from Luoyang base, and looking at the breath on his body, it seemed that he had also entered the Zongsha realm. Chumo remembered that when he first left from the Luoyang base, Wind Chaser was still only in the middle to late stages of martial master. I didn't expect to have reached the Zong master in the blink of an eye, so I thought I had gotten some chance. But Chumo noticed that he was arguing with a martial artist and seemed to have some kind of conflict, so he walked over. At this moment, Chasing Wind was full of stifled anger and arguing with the martial artist in front of him when he suddenly heard a voice from behind him. Patriarch Chu. He subconsciously turned around, and when he immediately saw Chumo standing in front of him, a flash of delight appeared on his face. It's been a long time. Are you in some kind of trouble here? Chummer asked. Words. The smile on Chasing Wind's face converged, and was replaced by some helplessness. It wasn't a fluke that I got some chance to enter the Zone Master realm, thinking that I hoped to go even further in the future, so I took my brothers away from the Luoyang base, and planned to come to the Jinling big base to make a break for it. But who knows that before I entered the city, I ran into trouble. I didn't expect the entry fee here to be so expensive, and I didn't have enough yuan stones on me, so I hoped that the martial artist guarding the city would be accommodating, letting me enter the city to sell my Tian Yuan flour and then pay the entry fee, but who knows that he wouldn't let me enter the city, and wanted to forcefully buy my Tian Yuan flour. The Tian Yuan flour is worth at least 13 million yuan stones, yet he's only willing to offer 3 million yuan stones. Isn't this a forced robbery? I then didn't intend to sell it to him and wanted to sell it to other martial artists, but this person threatened the others, forbidding anyone to buy it, or else he would have to make the other party look good. I couldn't swallow this breath, so I argued with him. As he said this, there was a touch of helplessness in his words. Have you guys said enough? Hurry up and hand over the Tian Yuan flour to me. At this point, a Zongsha martial artist standing at the city gates impatiently urged, Tell you what, I'll pay for your entry into the city. Seeing this, Chumo then intended to take out 3 million lower-grade yuan stones from within his carry-on space and help Chasing the Wind pay the city entry fee. But who knows? Kid, I advise you to mind your own business. Or else. This Zongsha martial artist suddenly looked at Chumo and opened his mouth to threaten. Hearing this, Chumo was happy. This was the first time someone had threatened him since he had destroyed the Su family. Therefore, he said with an expressionless face, Or what? How? This patriarchal martial artist said condescendingly, I'm a martial artist of the Jiang clan. If you dare to meddle in my business, I'll make sure that you have no place to stay within the great base of Jinling. Having said that, he turned his gaze to Chasing Wind again and said smugly, How about it? Are you willing to give me the heavenly yuan flour or not? If you don't sell it, I can guarantee that no one here will dare to buy it. And you won't be able to get into the big base in Jinling for the rest of your life. Hear that? Chaser couldn't help but clench his fists. Since becoming a patriarch, he was already at the top in Luoyang base. But who knew that he had just arrived at the Jinling Great Base and was threatened like this by a gatekeeper martial artist, which made it almost difficult for him to suppress his inner rage. But thinking about the purpose of their coming here, if they really had to make a move, I'm afraid that they would only be able to die, and maybe even involve Chumo. So then he gritted his teeth and said, Fine. I'll give it to you. Said. He then intended to take out the heavenly yuan flour from his storage bag. However, just as he was about to open the storage bag, he suddenly pressed down on Chumo. Kid, do you want to find death? That patriarchal martial artist had thought that the heavenly yuan flour was about to arrive, but who knew that it would be blocked by Chumo, so he immediately became furious. Whether I am looking for death or not is not clear, but you are definitely looking for death, Chumo said in a cold voice. And with his words fell, a powerful aura steeply emerged from him, sweeping out in an instant. This patriarchal martial artist immediately felt a blackness in front of his eyes, as if the sky had collapsed, and the heavy pressure caused him to directly fall to his knees with a plop. And just then, because of the aura that Chumo displayed, it also startled some of the strong men stationed at the city gates within the base. Instantaneous. There were several figures that swept in, carrying a strong aura, each of them at the Jin general level. Who dares to make trouble here? Bold. They had just fallen, and then they snapped just. When a Jin general martial artist at the head of the group got a good look at Mo's figure, his original stern color abruptly disappeared. In its place was a flash of shock. He hurriedly walked over to Chumo and bowed in fear. Dylan Shin's son, I didn't know that it was Venerable Chu coming, please forgive me. His Holiness. As soon as those two words appeared, the entire room fell silent. Within the great base of Jinling, the only ones who could be referred to as honored ones were powerful people who had stepped into the 8 Wastelands level. This also means that this young martial artist with an extremely young appearance was an 8 Desolate Exalted? Cluck cluck cluck. A sound of teeth chattering suddenly came out of the mouth of the kneeling martial artist. And a look of despair spread across his face. I previously was actually threatening an 8 Wastelands honored one? As soon as he thought of this, his heart and mind trembled wildly, and speechless fear immediately surfaced in his heart, and he hurriedly cowed out continuously while shouting out of his mouth, Dylan has eyes but no eyes, Dylan has eyes but no eyes, and I ask your holiness to forgive me, forgive me. He kept pleading however, Chumo did not even look at him, but looked at Shin Sun and recounted what happened. After hearing this, Shin Sun was immediately confused. He could not have imagined in any way that this Zhongshan martial artist had actually threatened the head of an 8 Desolate Venerable. Does he think he has lived long enough to try to find death? Behind Shin Sun's back, countless cold sweats immediately sprang up, soaking his clothes. Also please, Chu honored one to rest his anger, this is the villain's unfavorable discipline. You can rest assured that I will never be soft. Chumo nodded, then looked at Chasing Wind and said, how many yuan stones are still missing? 300 lower grade yuan stones. Wind Chaser said in a hurry. Chumo then took out 3 million lower grade yuan stones from his storage bag, and brought over Chasing the Wind's yuan stones, and handed them over to Shin Sun together. There's no need for the martial artists brought by Venerable Chu to pay yuan stones at all. Shin Sun hurriedly tried to refuse. Joke. At this time, where else would he dare to receive Chumo's yuan stones? Only Chumo, however, still forced it to Shin Sun, and then took Chasing Wind into the city. Wait until Tremor is gone. Shin Sun finally couldn't help but take a long breath and wipe the sweat from his forehead. Then he saw the Zhongshan martial artist kneeling on the ground and burst into a rage. Good Yu Jianggung, if you want to seek death, just say so, and actually dare to threaten an 8 Desolate Venerable, you're really growing in ability. Men, abolish his cultivation and send him to the dungeon. Shin Sun said angrily. The words came out. This Zhongshan martial artist named Jianggung immediately fell to the ground in a spread-eagled position, without the slightest trace of blood on his face. He knows. Finished with myself. In the meantime, the other martial artists who had originally stayed at the city gates were all breathing a long sigh of relief at this moment. Is this the 8 Desolate Exalted one? It's truly terrifying. When Venerable Chu displayed his breath just now, I could barely breathe. It's horrible, just horrible. A look of celebration passed over everyone's face as they whispered. Inside the base, Wind Chaser said to Chumo, thank you, Patriarch Chu, for your help. I'll return those 3 million yuan stones as soon as possible. We've known each other for a long time, no need to be so polite. Chumo waved his hand, then asked, do you have any plans next? I'm going to take my brothers and find a place to stay within the base first, then go to the Martial Artist Union to register a hunting squad and go out to hunt ferocious beasts. Chaser said truthfully. Hearing this, Chumo shook his head. The wilderness of the Jinling large base was too dangerous, with Wind Chaser, a Zhongshan, plus these teammates behind him who were martial masters or even martial artists. Trying to hunt ferocious beasts in the wilderness was too dangerous. But He could have absorbed Wind Chaser into the Celestial Pavilion instead. Now that the Tianji Pavilion had just been formed, there were many more tedious things, and it was impossible for Chu Mo and Chen Shiwei to do everything themselves, but Windchaser is a very suitable candidate. Although he is not very strong, his character is also very good, he knows what he is doing, and he is also very righteous. Just in time for him to become his first squad and help with some of the chores. With this in mind, Chu Mo spoke, "Wind Chaser, I've formed a force called Tianji Pavilion, I don't know if you're willing to join in?" When these words came out, a look of disbelief immediately appeared on Chasing Wind's face. Although he didn't know exactly how strong Chu Mo was. However, when the martial artist named Shin Sun arrived earlier, his breath was extremely terrifying, at least at the level of a Jin general, but he was fearful and cautious in front of Chu Mo. This showed that Chu Mo's strength was definitely very strong. And such a powerful man pulls himself together. Chaser knew that this was an opportunity for him. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Thus he agreed without hesitation, "Elder Chu, I'm willing to join." Chapter 133, The World Knows Venerable Chu. Just like that, Wind Chaser and a few of his teammates became the first batch of martial artists in Tianji Pavilion. Chu Mo brought them to the headquarters building of Tianji Pavilion. After seeing such a huge and magnificent building, Wind Chaser and the others were all stunned. As they envisioned it. Even if Chu Mo had set up a power, he thought that it should only be a small place, but who had thought that the area covered was actually so huge? Those buildings, each of which was gilded with splendor, were not at all extravagant, but instead carried an air of grandeur. Chasing Wind vaguely sensed a huge power contained within it just by looking at it. He understood immediately in these buildings, there were formations guarding them, and they were extremely skillful formations. If there was no correct method, even a Zhongsher-level martial artist rashly intruded, they would be heavily injured or even trapped, making it difficult to get out. Beyond that, there also seemed to be numerous spirit-gathering arrays constructed within the building, and the rich heaven and earth yuan qi poured into his body, following his pores all the time. With each inhale, Wind Chaser felt that his body seemed to be lighter with it. Wind Chaser can be sure of that. Just cultivating in this alone, even without taking any ferocious beast blood or heavenly materials, could multiply his cultivation speed. This is our Tianji Pavilion's power headquarters. Coming to the hall in the main center, Chu Mo said to Chasing Wind and the others, "This is a charter on the development of Tianji Pavilion's forces and a reward and punishment system. You all take a good look at it. Tomorrow my Tianji Pavilion will be about to start the recruitment of martial artists, and it will be up to you guys to be in charge of sucking in the martial artists. Currently, the Tianji Pavilion is still in its infancy, and you, as the first batch of martial artists, as long as you do your job well, you will all be Tianji Pavilion's deacon elders in the future." Chu Mo handed Chasing Wind the charter that he and Chen Shiwei had worked out together. Inside this constitution, not only did it contain Chu Mo's construction of the Tianji Pavilion, but there was also a perfect contribution system. The first is the promotion system. The Tianji Pavilion would be divided into 3 disciple sequences, the outer sect, the inner sect, and the true transmission, as well as 2 types of elders, the guest ministers and the deacons. Outer disciples are usually 15-year-olds who have not yet practiced or have low strength. Tianji Pavilion will grant them basic martial arts, and when they show their respective talents, they will be included in the inner sect and true succession sequence according to their loyalty and natural talent. As for the scattered martial arts practitioners, as long as they can be absorbed into directly is the inner disciple, which is stronger, will be awarded the position of guest elder. If the guest elders can pass the examination and are loyal to the Tianji Pavilion, they will be granted the position of deacon elder, and from then on, they will truly become the core members of the Tianji Pavilion, with a certain amount of authority. The higher the status within, the greater the access that can be gained. For example, true disciples could use their contributions to exchange all the treasures and resources and martial arts skills within the Tianji Pavilion, while inner disciples could only exchange a portion of them, and outer disciples had even fewer options to exchange. As for the contribution points, They were based on the completion of tasks issued by the Heavenly Pavilion or by turning in resources. Overall, this constitution and system, while still somewhat crude, contains the various functions that a power has. I understand, please Chu Senior. Asked the Pavilion Master, to rest assured. Chaser said solemnly. That's good. Chuemo nodded, and then chatted with Wind Chaser about some more details about the development of forces before leaving. Wait until he's gone. Those team members behind Wind Chaser, one by one, came together. Captain, this Senior Chu actually managed to have such a large place of power in the Jinling Great Base. It's really powerful. When I entered the city, the aura emanating from that Shin Sun was stronger than any martial artist I've ever seen in my life, but he was so cautious in front of Senior Chu. Just how far do you think the Senior Chu's strength has reached? I'm guessing it's at least a 4-square town general? Far more than that. When Senior Chu left Luoyang Base before, he was already able to kill a Jin general with a single slash. Until now Luoyang Base is still widely rumored. By now I guess it's also at least the peak of the quartet's Shin generals. This is the pinnacle of the Four Directions town general. Can we reach such heights in our lifetime? Maybe it's already in the realm above the Four Directions Shin general, that Shin Sun didn't call out to Chu Senior Venerable at that time? Could an honored one be above the realm of a Jin general? They were murmuring and their hearts were shaken. Don't talk about the Pavilion Master's strength behind his back, we'll naturally find out later on. At that moment, Wind Chaser waved his hand, interrupting their discussion, then continued, thanks to the Pavilion Master's appreciation, let us not only smoothly enter the Jinling large base, and even completely base down, this is the Pavilion Master's gift, everyone should remember this favor, do a good job under the Pavilion Master's command. If you let me know that in the future, who dares to eat the inside out, I can't spare him. I'll remember? Toward the end, there was a harshness in the words. Remember that, Captain. Don't worry, Captain, we understand. Yes. None of the brothers are eaters either. The crowd has spoken. That's fine. Wind Chaser nodded with satisfaction, his face slightly eased, and continued, all right, let's not be idle, let's stroll around here first, familiarize ourselves with the environment, and prepare to start absorbing martial artists tomorrow. Yes. Early the next morning, Wind Chaser and the others woke up from their cultivation and began to busy themselves within the headquarters. Although today was the time to officially recruit martial artists, but in chasing the wind they thought that a power like them should not have many people come involuntarily at first. But who knows? When the two martial artists opened the gate and prepared to stand guard at the entrance as Chasing Wind had instructed them to do, the scene they saw before their eyes left them completely dumbfounded. Only to see that at the gate, there were at least hundreds of martial artists standing densely packed. When they saw the gate open, they all bet their eyes on it. This is... The two martial artists hadn't reacted yet. A Zhongsher martial artist at the front then respectfully asked, dare I ask if this is the Tianji Pavilion? What are you doing? The two martial artists subconsciously nodded, then asked with a face full of vigilance. Don't get me wrong. We are casual martial artists from the Jinling Great Base, and after hearing that Pavilion Master Chu has created a power, we wanted to join in. Having said that, this martial artist, whose strength had already reached the Zhongsher realm, then asked somewhat cautiously, but I don't know if Tianji Pavilion is still recruiting martial artists now. What happened? At this time, Wind Chaser also noticed a number of martial artists gathering at the entrance, and immediately walked over and inquired. When the two martial artists saw Chasing Wind, they immediately seemed to have a backbone and hurriedly recounted the matter. Wind Chaser also froze when he heard that there were actually so many martial artists who wanted to join the Heavenly Chi Pavilion, but in a whirlwind he reacted. It's the influence of the Pavilion Master. Read this. Chasing Wind immediately spoke, trick. Tianji Pavilion is recruiting martial artists, as long as they meet the requirements, they can enter. As soon as these words came out, these martial artists who had gathered let out a sigh of relief, and then scrambled over, wanting to enroll. Take it easy, everyone form a line and stay in order. Everyone gets a chance to sign up. If you want to join the Tianji Pavilion, please come to me to get an enrollment form, fill it out first. Looking at the scene, situation has a tendency to be out of control. Chasing the Wind immediately began to maintain order. Luckily, these martial artists all knew that Tianji Pavilion was a force created by Chu Mo and didn't dare to act recklessly here, so they all cooperated one by one. They have formed a queue and received the forms to fill in according to the order. At this point, Chasing the Wind raised his eyes and looked at the hundreds of martial artists at the door, including many Zhongshan powerhouses, and even saw a few strength is very strong, and yesterday at the city gates to see that Shinsun are not comparable to the strong, actually all honestly stand at the door to fill out the form. It sent a great shock through his heart. What exactly did the pavilion master do after coming to the Jinling Grand Base? So much so that it's surprisingly prestigious? He was curious in his mind. It just so happened that there was a Zhongshan martial artist who was filling out a form next to him, so he walked over and asked, "Dare I ask your name?" "I don't dare to take your name, my name is Hikuan." When this Zhongshan martial artist saw Chasing Wind, he knew that he was the person in charge of recruiting martial artists from Tianji Pavilion, so he didn't dare to be slow and put his attitude very low. "Patriarchy, why do you want to join the Tianji Pavilion?" Chaser asked with some curiosity. "Of course it's because of Venerable Chu," Hikuan said with reverence on his face. "What did Venerable Chu do to make you all worship like this?" Chaser asked. "You actually don't know?" Hearing this question, Patriarch Hikuan raised his head, his face full of disbelief, and his eyes even carried a trace of incredulity. He seemed somewhat unable to imagine it. There were actually people who didn't know about Venerable Chu Mo's deeds. Seeing Patriarch he with such a look in his eyes, Chasing Wind was even more curious in his heart and hurriedly asked after him, "That's fine, since you don't know, then I'll tell you about Venerable Chu." Patriarch he cleared his throat, and then he began to speak at length. And as he tells it, Wind Chaser also completely froze in place, and a wave of shock was set off in his heart. In full view of everyone, a single slash kills the 8 desolate Venerable One who came to attack. Then he single-handedly killed the Su family and wiped out the entire Su family, one of the 4 great families of the Jinling Great Base, killing the Su family's oldest ancestor in an invincible manner. The Gu, Shen, and Zhou family ancestors of the 4 great families are intimidated by the strength of Venerable Chu, and have even taken the initiative to show their goodwill and help eradicate the Su family. The strength is unrivaled in the Golden Base. Once he became famous, he was honored as the Venerable Bastard Swordsman. Listening to Patriarch He's spiteful narration, Wind Chaser could not return to his senses for a long time, only feeling as if he was in a dream. After a long time, he came back to his senses then. Unable to hide the shock in his heart, he subconsciously murmured, "It turns out that Senior Chu already possesses such a terrifying strength, without even realizing it, so that I don't even have the qualifications to look at my back from afar." Chapter 134, Hiding the Blade in the Sheath. Qin Shiwei steps into the Zhongshan realm. Still not the slightest bit of growth. In the cultivation room, Chu Mo opened his eyes, revealing a look of disappointment. Nowadays, his cultivation tends to grow in a steady state. Plus, at the level of a Jin General, if one wanted to cultivate to the peak of a Jin General to have the power to break through the 8 desolate exalted, it wouldn't be accomplished overnight. Therefore, Chu Mo began to comprehend the blade intent in addition to his cultivation. But alas! With the fact that he was merely only an advanced sword cultivation talent right now, he hadn't made the slightest bit of growth at all. Actually, if it wasn't for the fact that Chu Mo had comprehended a trace of saber intent on his own in the first place, and then successively obtained such a chance as the Enlightenment Stone Tablet, otherwise, with his saber talent, wanting to raise it to 50% saber intent would simply be impossible. After all, generally, martial artists who possessed advanced blade talent could only comprehend a trace of blade intent at their limit, and trying to raise it to 10% would be called a miracle. Finding a higher blade talent, or finding heavenly treasures that can enhance it, is imminent. Chumo thought darkly. But it's not something that's going to be fixed anytime soon. It takes a certain amount of chance and luck. It's better to cultivate Shantian battling slash and shadowless illusionary steps first. Chummer decided. These two martial arts, although he has been introduced, but after all, the shadowless phantom step is a silver level martial arts, and the Shantian battalion chop is even more gold level martial arts. The difficulty of cultivation is very high, so to this day he has only cultivated it to the realm of small success. There is still a long way to go before perfection. Chu Mo planned to spend the next few moments practicing, so that his stance would be even more swift and his sword skills would be even sharper. First is the shadowless phantom step. Chu Mo began to concentrate on his enlightenment. Silver level stances were very profound, and an ordinary martial artist who wanted to advance them to the point of perfection would need at least several decades, unless they possessed the relevant attribute talent to shorten the time. Chu Mo, on the other hand, possessed a top-notch wind attribute talent, plus he had also relied on the shadowless phantom steps many times to fight in real battles, accumulating quite a bit of experience. Therefore, under the concentration on enlightenment, the progress of cultivation could be said to be in leaps and bounds. It only took 20 days. The shadowless illusionary steps had then been cultivated to the perfection realm by him. Subsequently, Chu Mo started practicing Shantian battling slash again. Although this blade technique was gold level, Chu Mo had comprehended 50% of the blade intent, so the speed of comprehension was not slow, but even faster. Why are all swords sheathed? It is because the true meaning of a sword is not in killing, but in hiding the blade. The sword that is not drawn possesses the greatest deterrent power. Therefore, the focus of Shantian battling knife chop is not on the moment of drawing the knife, but on the moment of hiding the knife in the sheath, when the mind and spirit are contained, and the sharpness of the blade is restrained. Wait until you unsheath your sword, your heart is filled with the aura of lawlessness, and in a flash, the stone breaks the sky. Wherever the eye reaches, there is nothing that cannot be chopped and no one that cannot be killed. Where the will goes, the blade goes. Accompanied by his murmuring voice, a blade intent so dense that it was as if it was substantial surged out wildly from within his body, and the internal chi in his dantian operated crazily, and then with a surprisingly loud bang, it surged out of the dantian and into his meridians. It was as if a river was draining and waves were lapping at the shore, as the boiling chi and blood yuan power was poured into the meridians in one fell swoop. Only a snap sound could be heard, as if something in the body had been broken. The boiling chi and blood yuan power stirred madly in the body, and the 365 blade chi vortexes above and below the circumference of the body even trembled in unison in the meantime. Chu Mo placed on the knee of the autumn kill knife, but also suddenly trembled, seems to be unable to resist, want to unsheath the knife. However, Chu Mo acted as if he didn't see it, and just closed his eyes in enlightenment. Along with his continuous enlightenment, what Chu Mo didn't know was, when this autumn-killing blade in front of him trembled, with him as the center, within the entire area of the base that was hundreds of miles in circumference, whether it was hanging on the waist of a martial artist or held in the hands of a martial artist. Whether it's a long or short knife or even a kitchen knife. All of them suddenly trembled in unison in that instant. Under the convergence, it unexpectedly shook the heavens and moved the earth, penetrating straight through the universe. Everyone was shocked beyond words, their faces full of astonishment and uncertainty, not knowing what was going on. Only the old ancestors of the three great clans of Gu, Shen, and Zhou, as well as old ancestor Mo of the Jade Merchant Alliance, vaguely seemed to sense something, and all of them snapped out of their seclusion and raised their eyes in the direction where Chu Mo was. This seems to be coming from Venerable Chu's side. Venerable Chu's blade technique seems even stronger. Just what realm is his limit? An absolute heavenly pride, hard to fathom. They murmured out one after another, and a look of shock appeared in their eyes. And at this point, just as Chu Mo was comprehending the Shantian battling blade slash, in the other cultivation room of the villa, Chen Shiwei was also tuning his breath to meditate, feeling the burst of harsh aura coming from the side. Her previously calm face showed a rare touch of softness at this time. Husband is already so strong, yet he's still working. So hard, Qin Shiwei, if you don't want to be left behind and not even see husband's back, you have to cultivate even harder. She looked at the ice crystals in her hand and thought darkly. This object was indeed extremely compatible with her, although she had not yet subdued it and transformed it into her own Tao base. Just by holding it in her hand, she felt her body, which had already begun to give birth to longing. Husband has even found you this top-notch spirit-inducing object, Qin Shiwei, you must not fail your husband's expectations. With this in mind, she fell into meditation as she listened to the sword's roar and felt the overpowering force. For unusual martial artists, seclusion needed to be in a quiet place. And drawing the spirit to build the foundation was vital for martial artists, requiring absolute silence and composure. However, at this moment, Qin Shiwei felt that these roars did not cause any impact on her. Instead, it's still very much at peace. Because she knows that the husband is around. As long as her husband was there, she wasn't afraid of anything. With this thought, Qin Shiwei glanced at the ice crystal in his hand and without the slightest hesitation, he directly swallowed it. In an instant, a terrifying aura surged out from its circumference. On his body, a flashy light was reflected. And under such a flashy light, the aura on her body was climbing up by leaps and bounds. An icy chill spread throughout the house. In a flash, the house had then been completely frozen. The sound of knives chiming and trembling would resonate abruptly from time to time over the next 3 days. It was not until the evening of the 3rd day that the sound of the knives fell away completely, never to be heard again. Also on this same evening. Who? Chu Mo suddenly opened his eyes and let out a long breath. At this moment, the blade intent on his body had completely dissipated, and his entire person looked as if he was an extremely ordinary martial artist. The autumn-killing blade in his hand, however, looked even more ordinary, completely restrained in its sharpness. 3 days of bitter cultivation to comprehend the true meaning of Hidden Blade. It makes the Shantian battling slash completely complete. Chu Mo muttered to himself, a radiant brightness appearing in his eyes. In 3 days' time, advancing a gold-level martial skill from a minor accomplishment to the point of perfection, if it was said, I'm afraid no one would believe it. But now, it's really happening to him. Back when I was still at the small completion realm, the Shantian battling slash was able to make my blade technique explode with incredible power. Now completely consummated. But I wonder how powerful it will be again? Chu Mo secretly thought, with some anticipation in his heart, thinking that when he subsequently found some time, he would go out and try out. Along with the successful cultivation of these 2 martial arts, Chu Mo was ready to leave the gate. And just then. However, he suddenly perceived that within the house next to him, there came an extremely cold and incomparably cold breath, as if it was able to freeze one's soul, instantly sweeping. One could not help but subconsciously shiver all over his body. Chu Mo was first stunned, then a smile appeared on his face. Shiwei. The foundation has been successfully built. He immediately walked out from the quiet room and came to the door of Shiwei's practicing room. At this time, she had not yet come out of the gate, she should still be consolidating her realm. Therefore, Chu Mo stood and waited here to protect him. But for a tea time. Accompanied by the door to the quiet room opening, a fresh fragrance hit his nose, and Chu Mo saw a silhouette walk out from it. As usual, it is still the same nickel and fade away, only this time there is more high cold. It was like a snow lotus orchid blooming alone on top of a snowy mountain. Husband. At this time, when Qin Shiwei saw Chu Mo, she immediately greeted him with a smile. The icy aura on his body dissipated into nothingness. Just after leaving the customs, he saw his closest relatives waiting, which made Qin Shiwei very happy. However, it was a fascinating sight to see the curved corners of the eyebrows, as if they were crescent moons. How? Chu Mo looked at the aura on her body and couldn't help but laugh. Fortunately, I have already forged a flawless Tao foundation and stepped into the sect master realm. Qin Shi smiled, then made a serious bow and said, Many thanks, husband. Between you and I, husband and wife, there's no need to be polite about these mundane rituals. Chummer said. The latter nodded obediently. Only the eyes that looked at Chu Mo carried a radiant light. It was as bright as a star. And at that moment, Chu Mo could be heard saying, "Seeing that you've successfully stepped into the true spirit, I'm relieved. Below you cultivate well, with your talent, perhaps it won't be long before you can step into the Jin general realm." Hearing this, Chen Shiwei still nodded obediently. "Today is a good day for you to forge a flawless Dao foundation and step into the sect master realm. I'll personally cook and give you a delicious meal," Chummer said with a smile. "Yeah," he said with a happy frown in front of outsiders. She was always cold, like an iceberg, unattainable. Only in front of Chu Mo would she show her little daughter's disposition. Subsequently, the two of them then went out together, as if they were ordinary residents, and went to the grocery store to purchase some green vegetables. Meat was not bought. Chu Mo still had quite a few grade 5 and even grade 6 ferocious beasts meat within his carry-on space. Back inside the villa, Chu Mo personally cooked a big meal. After they were full of wine and food, neither of them practiced cultivation, but instead, they embraced each other on the sofa and chatted about some small talk. Although both of them were now zongshi or above martial artists with high strength. But in the end, still young. It wasn't long before Chu Mo suddenly received a message from Wind Chaser. Chapter 135 Tianji Pavilion is on track, for Square Town will come to vote. In the Tianji Pavilion, Chu Mo looked at Chasing Wind, who was standing with his hands tied in front of him in a respectful manner, and after scrutinizing him carefully, he couldn't help but nod his head in satisfaction. It's just been less than a month. The aura on Chasing the Wind was much thicker, and it even had some lingering aura, so he thought that he should have practiced the bronze-level martial art frost sword technique, and he had also introduced it to the door. It looks like his cultivation qualifications should be good as well. Speaking of which, although Wind Chaser hadn't broken the limits of his physical body before stepping into the Zongshi realm, and hadn't forged a strong Dao foundation, he also had a medium wind attribute talent in addition to a good cultivation talent. In the past, when he was at the Luoyang base, he was able to rely on himself to cultivate to the martial master realm at the age of 30 or so, which was a testament to his natural talent and perseverance. And now came to the big base of Jinling. If it can be fed with many heavenly materials and treasures to make up for the foundation, I think that in the future, it can also become the mainstay of the Tianji Pavilion and take on some heavy responsibilities. Think about it. This made Chu Mo's heart quite satisfied. Just when Chu Mo was thinking like this, at this moment, Chasing Wind said with a respectful attitude, "Pavilion Master, during the time you were in seclusion, there were quite a number of martial artists within the Jinling large base who wanted to enter our heavenly pavilion, so I followed your instructions and carefully selected some martial artists and teenagers whose character, heart and talent were good to enter the door as either an outer or an inner disciple." Hearing this, Chu Mo was a bit surprised. Recruiting disciples so quickly? As he spoke, he spread his spiritual power out. Sure enough, he saw that within the entire headquarters, where the inner disciples were located, there were already hundreds of themas for the place where the outer disciples lived. There were likewise more than 200 teenagers exercising the forging body method to polish their bodies and refine their physiques. Among the outer disciples, some were at the martial apprentice realm, while others had no cultivation at all. And most of the inner disciples among them were martial artists and martial masters realm, and among them, there were also some martial artists of the sovereign realm. At this point, they've all gone their separate ways and are functioning properly. Seeing this scene, Chu Mo was quite surprised in his heart. It's only been less than a month and you've already recruited so many disciples? Just then, he heard Wind Chaser continue, "Pavilion Master doesn't know. Ever since you overthrew the Su family, Pavilion Master, your fame has spread throughout the entire base, causing countless forces and martial artists to be shaken by it, so much so that even though I, Tianji Pavilion, have only just been created, I have a not-so-low status amongst the many martial artists and forces from all sides, and I am almost on par with the 3 great clans. So when we started taking in martial artists, there were quite a few casual martial artists throughout the base who came and wanted to worship in the pavilion. Even the many martial arts academies and high school schools within the base have sent people to contact me, wanting to collaborate so that their students can enter our heavenly pavilion to cultivate within after graduation. Therefore, this is how we were able to select hundreds of disciples to be initiated in a short period of time. This is just the beginning. After a while, when the news of the Tianji Pavilion absorbing martial artists spreads more widely, I'm afraid that there will be even more martial artists who will come, hoping to worship under the door. When he said this, Chasing Wind's eyes that looked at Chu Mo carried a strong reverence. The pavilion master's feats of strength are through the heavens and through the earth. To be recruited by the pavilion master within the Tianji Pavilion is truly my chance. These days, while Chasing the Wind was absorbing disciples, he himself went and practiced a bronze-level martial skill and a yuan power body forging method that Chu Mo had placed inside the headquarters treasure trove, causing his strength to change drastically in a very short period of time. It's only been a few days. He then vaguely felt that his cultivation seemed to be on the verge of breaking through to the mid-sovereign realm. This was a speed he couldn't even think of before. More importantly, Wind Chaser also saw that there were many heavenly treasures and precious martial arts in the treasury. There were even silver and even gold-level martial arts among them. And all of these can be exchanged for contributions. Wind Chaser couldn't dare to imagine. If he waited until he had accumulated enough contributions and exchanged for silver or even gold-level martial arts in the future, how far would he have accumulated his strength? And if you can redeem those heavenly treasures in the treasury, perhaps in time, he would be able to step into the level of a Four Directions town general as well. It's safe to say, for Wind Chaser, this place was simply a heavenly paradise for cultivation. No. It is not just a cave. It is not too much to call it a holy land of martial arts. It's like right now. Aren't there already quite a few martial artists out there who are planning to worship in the Tianji Pavilion? All this is a gift from the pavilion master. It's been a month. Every time Chasing Wind woke up from cultivation, he couldn't help but think so. The respect and loyalty for Chu Mo in his heart was also growing by the day. No exaggeration. If Wind Chaser's loyalty had a numerical value, it would have absolutely exploded. Well done. Chu Mo said approvingly. Getting praised, Chasing the Wind was immediately a bit flattered, but then seemed to think of something, and hastily added, Pavilion Master, because this time to worship into the heavenly pavilion of martial arts, there are still a few of the Xingong realm of the strong, because of their strength is relatively strong, I do not know for a moment whether to absorb it, so it is temporarily shelved. Said that waiting for you to get out of the gate and then decide. Speaking of this, he hurriedly bowed in fear to apologize. This is an unauthorized claim by my subordinate, please punish the pavilion master. Upon hearing this, Chu Mo laughed, what's the offense? Not to mention the fact that Wind Chaser was able to put the entire heavenly pavilion in order in such a short period of time, and that the disciples he recruited were quite in line with his wishes in every aspect, thus it was evident that Wind Chaser had really used his heart in dealing with these matters. As for not absorbing martial artists above the Jin generals, although it was Chasing the Wind's own initiative, it was more reflective of his steadiness. For Square Town general-level martial artists were different from other ordinary martial artists. Each of them has a very strong power. Although it was not worth mentioning in front of Chu Mo, it was incredibly powerful and difficult to resist for ordinary martial artists. Such a martial artist, when placed in any force, belonged to the mainstay. If they were to be absorbed, they would at least need to be given the status of an elder. As for Tianji Pavilion, although there was Chu Mo sitting at the helm, in the end, it was only a newly established force, and any senior officers had to go through a strict screening process. Otherwise, once there was a certain elder with an impure heart, it would easily lead to internal chaos within the heavenly hall. This was definitely not something Chu Mo was willing to see. Thinking so, Chu Mo opened his mouth and said, "You've done a good job, why should you be punished? And get up." At that, Chaser straightened up. Chu Mo, on the other hand, continued, "After this incident, it is evident that you have used your heart in selecting disciples. And these outer disciples that you have recruited up will be your responsibility to teach for the time being. Except that teaching them always requires a name. Both. Wind Chaser, from today onwards, you are my Tianji Pavilion's outer sect, Deacon Elder. Words. Wind Chaser looked up with an open mind. The gaze that looked toward Chu Mo was filled with delight. But then, he saluted with all the excitement, subordinate, many thanks to Pavilion Master. Before that, Chasing the Wind was absorbed into the Tianji Pavilion though. But no real name is given. And now, Chu Mo was the one who had designated him as a Deacon Elder. Although it was only a Deacon Elder of the outer sect. But he had read the Tianji Pavilion's constitution and knew that but any Deacon Elder already belonged to the core of Tianji Pavilion. This description is for. From this moment on. He then completely became a beloved subordinate in the heart of the Pavilion Master. To be able to follow such a strong person, how could this not make Wind Chaser excited? Don't get too happy. Seeing Chasing Wind's excited appearance, Chu Mo said, although already a Deacon Elder, but did not rest on his laurels. Martial cultivation is like rowing a boat against the current. Although my Tianji Pavilion is in its infancy and does not have much strength, but in time, it will be able to develop, and by that time, there will be quite a few Xingong level martial artists, and if you are still a Zhongshe martial artist, by that time, you, the first Deacon Elder within the Tianji Pavilion, will have a hard time looking at your face. Hearing these words, Chasing Wind's heart and mind were in awe, and he was busy saying, "Don't worry, Pavilion Master, Chasing Wind will definitely cultivate with all his heart and soul, and will never fail to live up to Pavilion Master's great love." Chu Mo nodded and added, "Where are those General martial artists now? Some of them have already gone back, but they all agreed to wait for you to come out of the gate and let me contact them, and currently outside of the Tianji Pavilion, there is still a General that has been waiting." Wind Chaser said in a hurry. "Then send them a message to come over for a visit." Chummer said. For these several General level martial artists, Chu Mo still wanted to meet them. If the other party did not have ill intentions, Chu Mo would naturally absorb them and grant them the position of Elder. Wind Chaser just answered. Inside one of the halls at the core of Tianji Pavilion, Chu Mo sat on the main seat and waited quietly. Soon after, Wind Chaser then walked in with an upright man. The man looked middle-aged in appearance, with a touch of vicissitude in his eyes, as if he had been in the world for a long time. And the cultivation on his body was quite impressive. Surprisingly, he had already reached the level of a peak General. This caused Chu Mo to not be able to stop his eyes from glazing over. At this point, the two had already walked to the door, and Wind Chaser bowed and said in a respectful manner, "Pavilion Master, the person has been brought. Enter." Chu Mo's calm voice came out. "My name is Su Chuan, I've met Venerable Chu." The middle-aged man stepped in and upon seeing Chu Mo, he immediately bowed and saluted. Chu Mo nodded slightly and said, "I heard that you want to join my Tianji Pavilion, but I see that your cultivation has already reached the peak level of a General, and you are just one step away from stepping into the level of an 8 Wastelands Venerable, so if you were to enter other forces, you would definitely be able to hold a high position and obtain countless cultivation resources. A strong person at the peak level of a General." Without the several 8 desolate exalted masters in the base stepping forward, they were already the top combatants in the base. Be taken seriously wherever you go. Trummer had no doubt. If this person chose to enter the 3 great clans or even the Jade Merchant Alliance, he would inevitably be personally received by each family's ancestor with a great deal of courtesy and respect. So, why did you choose to join such a freshly created force as my Tianji Pavilion? Speaking here, Chu Mo's body leaned forward slightly, his gaze as jaundiced as he looked at Su Chuan. It seemed to be anticipating his answer. Chapter 136, Recruiting 3 Generals, the secret realm left behind by the Su clan. Listening to Chu Mo's inquiry, Su Chuan was silent for a moment, then slowly opened his mouth. "I'm not hiding it from Venerable Chu. I used to come from a small base called Xincheng around the large base of Jinling, and my family is quite thinly veiled in the base, and my talent is quite good, so the elders in the clan all have high hopes for me. And I have indeed lived up to my family's expectations. At the age of 15 I set foot on the path of cultivation, and in less than 30 years I have already stepped into the Jin general realm. Make my family the top power in the small base of Hsin Chong. Later, in order to go further, I walked out from the base and traveled in all directions, who knows. When he said this, his tone of voice steeply fluctuated. In his eyes, there was also a flash of hatred. 8 years ago. A violet frost Xian leaf has appeared near Xincheng's small base, capable of slightly increasing the chances of a Jin general martial artist breaking through to an 8 desolate exalted. My clan helped me snatch this heavenly treasure. But the Su family learned of this news from somewhere and sent several town generals to seize it, and when the family refused to comply, they went so far as to raze my entire family to the ground. All up and down my Su family, totaling 137 direct descendants and 426 hired subordinates, all of them were killed, not a single one left behind. The string of numbers almost squeezed out of his teeth, word for word predictable. What kind of resentment did he have in his heart towards the Su family? Since then, I have vowed to destroy the Su family. It's a pity that the Su family is one of the 4 great families of the Jinling Great Base. Their power is enormous. How difficult is it to overthrow them? Although I have talent, but over the years, has been in the wilderness to kill with ferocious beasts, 8 years from the early stage of the Jin general into the peak of the Jin general, just 1 step short of entering the 8 wastelands venerable, but it is this step, but it is as difficult as the blue sky. I originally thought that if I wanted to overthrow the Su clan in this life and get my revenge, I was afraid that I would have to continue to endure for countless days, and I couldn't even see the slightest hope. Who knows? Just when I was most desperate, I suddenly heard that the Su family had been eradicated. Speaking here, with a radiant gaze in his gaze, he murmured, killing Su Lang with a single slash under the eyes of all, and later killing and injuring the Su family's compound, beheading the Su family's old ancestor, and wiping out the Su family's entire family. This is something that I don't know how many nights I've thought of, and just like this was done by you, Venerable Chu. God knows just how happy I was when I learned of this news, and I even made the rare move of not cultivating and getting drunk for a day. A smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Then he shook his head, sighed, and said, in my entire life, since the destruction of my family, my belief in living has been for vengeance, and now that Venerable Chu has helped me to avenge my great hatred, he is my Sichuan's benefactor. Therefore, when I learned that Venerable Chu was recruiting martial artists, I immediately came here, only wishing to be under Venerable Chu's command to be driven. Having said that, he bent down deeply and made a very solemn bow. Listening to these words, Chu Mo finally realized why Sichuan had come to join him in the Heavenly Mechanics Pavilion. Though it felt a little dog-eared. Yet, Trummer was able to tell from his eyes that this was a true story. Even he could sense that Sichuan genuinely wanted to join Tianji Pavilion. Because of this, Chu Mo pondered a little, then said, when my Tianji Pavilion was first created, it was the time to recruit talents. You have the cultivation of a peak Shin general, your strength is not bad, your talent is even better, it's not impossible for you to enter the level of the 8 wastelands venerable one in the future. In that case, then from now on, you will serve as a deacon elder in my Tianji Pavilion. A peak Shin general martial artist belonged to the ranks of top powerhouses within the Jinling Great Base. Can't wait to see what happens. Therefore, Chu Mo directly conferred the position of deacon elder. Words. Sichuan immediately let out a sigh of relief, and his face revealed a look of delight as he said, "Thank you, Venerable Chu, for your appreciation. Sichuan, pay your respects to the pavilion master." With that, he made a serious bow. Chu Mo, on the other hand, accepted this salute openly before personally assisting him up. Since then, the two have settled into a subordinate relationship. Congratulations, Pavilion Master, for having a strong person like Elder Su to join us. At that moment, Wind Chaser came over to congratulate him. Chu Mo was also very happy in his heart, and said to Sichuan, "Now that my Tianji pavilion has just been founded, many matters are still relatively complicated, so you will first cultivate in the headquarters, and when everything is on track, you will be able to freely choose your tasks." "Yes." Sichuan nodded. The two of them then chatted for a while, when a martial artist came to report that all the other town generals had gotten the news to come over and were ready to seek an audience. Sichuan knew that Chu Mo still had important matters to attend to, so he planned to leave. And just as he was about to walk out of the hall, behind, suddenly came Chummer's voice. "Elder Su. Although you are now sincere in joining my Tianji pavilion, it is ultimately to repay your kindness. If you want to leave in the future, you can also leave at any time." Sichuan's departing figure lurched for it. Subsequently, he turned around and gave a solemn salute to Chu Mo before walking out. Not a word was said in the meantime, but his attitude was on display. 2 hours later, Chu Mo met the other 4 general martial artists. One of them had a somewhat poor reputation, which Chu Mo politely refused, while the other had a somewhat impure mind, which was also refused by Chu Mo, leaving 2 other casual martial artists. These 2 were a man and a woman. The man was called Wang Zhan, with a pale appearance and image of an old man. And the female is called Feng Li, and she looks like a middle-aged woman. Both of them were at the early stage of general cultivation and were granted the status of guest elder by Chu Mo. The reason why there was a difference with Sichuan was because Chu Mo would also have to assess them and determine their loyalty in the future before they would be promoted to deacon eldorates, just a guest post though. However, the 2 of them didn't have any objections to this, and instead, they were very grateful to Chu Mo. Although they were general martial artists, because they were casual cultivators without any background behind them, if they joined a large power, they would not be able to become core personnel and would not be valued. And if they joined a small power, the offerings they received were also very small and extremely limited to their growth. But Chu Mo's Tianji pavilion was different. Although it was only a start-up, with Chu Mo, the strong man who had overthrown the Su clan, at the helm, it was bound to become a top-notch power in the future. This is the time to pitch in. In case if he got Chu Mo's appreciation, there might be hope for further advancement in the future. Now that Tianji Pavilion has 3 town generals defecting to it, it is also considered to be a force of no small magnitude, and now that Chasing Wind is taking care of it, making the top and bottom begin to operate in an orderly manner, I guess I don't need to bother keeping an eye on it next. Even if something comes up, 2 early-stage generals plus a peak general martial artist will be able to handle 1 or 2 things. Next, I'll be able to focus on my cultivation and strive to step into the peak general realm as soon as possible. Of course. Before that, there are a few chores to take care of. Chu Mo thought darkly in his heart. There are 2 of these chores. One of them was that Chu Mo sold half of the Su family's stores for the 3 great clans and the Jade Merchant Alliance as well as the Formation Masters Association to purchase, and all of these resources had to be recovered as soon as possible. The second was to find the secret area where the Su family stored their heavenly treasures. According to what Gu Song had said that day, the majority of the Su family's resources were hidden within the secret territory, which was an unbelievably rich accumulation of a top family for 100 years. Only because all of the Su family's direct descendants were dead, it was currently impossible to find the entrance to the secret realm. However, Chu Mo had mastered the spatial talent, and using his spatial perception ability, he might be able to capture the location of this secret realm. It was not that Trummer was whimsical. Rather, it has a great deal of feasibility. After all, any secret realm was dependent on the space of the Blue Star main world, and the nodes it was hooked up to were bound to be different from other places. An analogy. If the entire space of the Blue Star was considered an ocean, even if these dependent secret realms were ships, a ship that wants to fix its position in the sea is bound to anchor. And the nodes of the hook are the anchors of the ship. The secret realm controlled by the Su clan is a core secret, and it is bound to be at the Su clan's headquarters. In other words, the location of this secret realm is nearby. The Tianji Pavilion was built on top of the ruins of the Su clan. That was why Chu Mo immediately dispersed his spatial perception ability and carefully probed every inch of the surrounding space. Since his spatial talent had been elevated to a higher level, his spatial perception had also reached a 5-mile radius, almost able to encompass 1/3 of the original Su clan's headquarters. A careful search can be done in half an hour at the most fruity. Soon. Chu Mo then realized that there was an abnormality existing in one of the spatial nodes, and he immediately converged his spatial power over, wanting to enlarge the spatial node and form a rift. No matter how much he poured spatial power into the spatial node, there was no movement at all. It seems that the entrance to this secret realm has a prohibition, and in order to open it up, you need a key. Chu Mo frowned slightly. This secret realm was just like the Wanhua secret realm that Chu Mo had entered back then, and in order to open it up, one had to have the assistance of a treasure, which was the key to the secret realm. It was just like the Wanhua disc that was held in Mo Shanshan's hands back then. Generally speaking, most of the secret realms that required a key to open were small secret realms or some sort of special secret realm. Small secret realms are fine. If a special secret realm was forced to open without a key, it would easily cause the space within the secret realm to collapse, but special secret realms are extremely precious. With the Su family's strength, how could they possibly hold a special secret realm? The great probability of this secret realm is just a small secret realm. With my higher spatial talent today, I might be able to try to force it open. Thinking so, Chu Mo directly then arrived in front of the space node with a flash of his body, and then operated his spatial talent. Shasta. Countless spatial forces around him then converged over, forming a spatial blade in his hand that could not be observed with the naked eye. Swing it out casually. The spatial blade shot out directly and landed on the spatial node. In the next moment, a small black dot was seen steeply appearing in this space, which then gradually expanded to form a pitch-black crack. The crack grew larger and larger, eventually settling when it reached about 2 meters through the cracks. Chu Mo could feel a rich yuan qi escaping from it. And that means the secret world open up. Chapter 137, The Su Family's 100 Years of Accumulation, The Sealed Compound. With the spatial power I've added as support, I can make the exit of this secret realm last for about a day. Should be enough for me to enter. Thinking so, Chu Mo then directly stepped inside. Along with the feeling of seemingly passing through a membrane came, first a black eye, and then when they could see clearly again, they realized that they had already changed heaven and earth. Raise your eyes and look around. A building was seen spread around, carved and painted, extremely luxurious. On the ground, there were some spiritual herbs and fruits planted everywhere, which were scrambling to bloom at this moment. Far away, with a small peak, a small stream flowed down from the top of the mountain. The water flow wasn't big, but it was purely composed of yuan liquid. It really is a small secret realm with extremely dense yuan qi. Chu Mo thought darkly. This secret realm wasn't big. Chu Mo strolled around and realized that it was only 100 miles in size. Even in a small secret realm, it was an extremely miniature existence. However, the yuan qi was extremely dense. Even an ordinary person who hadn't practiced cultivation, staying here would be able to stay free of all diseases and live peacefully until he was 100 years old. It was probably because of this reason that the Su family used it as a secret family realm. Next, it's harvest time. Trummer's eyes brightened. But he remembered that the vast majority of the Su family's treasures were in this secret realm. And after coming in, he did feel the scent and light of treasures coming from quite a few buildings. No need to think, it must be the Su family's collection present. Without the slightest hesitation, Chu Mo directly performed his body technique and flew towards the nearest large hall. Just go in. Just see more than a dozen wooden racks set up here. On each of the wooden shelves, a number of wooden boxes were densely placed. Open it. Various kinds of spiritual grasses and fruits then came into view. Purple star belladonna. Silver frost bamboo. Broken sky stone. Mullein grass. A variety of spirit herbs or treasures that were rare in the outside world appeared in front of Chumo. Without the slightest hesitation, Chumo directly loaded them all into his carry-on space. Then he left the great hall and once again went to another house. Soul-nourishing pill. Restoration Dan. Tianxing pills. Unsullied fluid. Inside this house, most of what was placed were pills or spiritual liquids. Chumo also directly loaded them all into his carry-on space. Go to the third house. All that is placed here are weapons and blades. The vast majority of them were fourth-ranked weapons, not worth mentioning, but Chumo also took them all in, so that when he turned around, he could put them into the treasury of the Tianji Pavilion as rewards for the martial artists under his command to exchange for contribution points. Also worth mentioning. Among these weapons, there was also a fifth-rank spirit weapon. It was a flying needle that was about a foot long, cold and sharp, and there was a mechanism on the flying needle that allowed it to spread out and form 18 even tinier flying needles. If used as a concealed weapon, it would be extremely convenient. This flying needle was carefully placed in a jade box by the Su clan. Now it's cheap for Chumo. After putting it away, Chumo left once again to search for the next great hall. In just a few moments, Chumo had already scoured most of the buildings. The total value of the treasures obtained amounted to at least $50 billion or more. It's really a bumper crop. Su family, Su family, you're really my money-giving children. With such generous resources, even Chumo couldn't help but show a touch of joy on his face. With these treasures alone, it was more than enough to support all of him and Chen Shiwei's cultivation to 8 desolate exalted. Keep scraping. Looking at the few remaining buildings, Chumo made a dash for it, intending to scavenge them all. So in the next half hour, Chumo ran through the remaining buildings again, once again obtaining treasures worth about 20 billion yuan stones. This caused Chumo's total harvest in the secret realm to have reached around 70 billion. At this point, Chumo arrived at one of the most central halls among the many buildings. This large hall had a lot of space, but there were not many things placed inside, only a few wooden shelves, and it looked very empty. But when the eyes of the gaze fell on the wooden shelf, they were steeply frozen. Shelves of wire-bound books. Here, all of the Su family's martial arts techniques were clearly hidden. Walking over to the wooden shelf, he looked at the various martial arts arranged on it, and at a cursory glance, there were more than 20 books. All of them were bronze-level martial arts. Beyond that, in the center of the main hall, there were also 3 silver medals and a gold order. This was clearly a record of the Su clan's most central silver grade and gold grade martial arts. 3 silver grade martial arts, namely the Pine Wind Sword technique, the Heart-Destroying Palm, and the Wuyue Yuanqi Body Forging technique. As for this gold-level martial art, Chumo picked up the Golden Order and his spiritual power probed into it. It was soon learned from the information inside that this gold-level martial skill, named True Dragon Roar, it was an extremely domineering sound wave attack. If one was able to cultivate it successfully, a single roar would be enough to cause one's qi and blood to collapse, one's yuan power to surge, one's head to spin, and one's ability to act to be lost. The sound wave martial skill was still the first time Chumo had seen it. But this kind of martial art's invisible, and moves extremely swift, if you can learn down, and then the key moment of fighting with the enemy, suddenly roar, absolutely able to let the other side caught off guard under the trick. Nice. Chummer was satisfied. I plan to take a closer look at it when I leave. After storing all of these martial arts within his carry-on space, Chumo exhaled a long breath of relief in a rather comfortable manner. As he looked around, he couldn't help but sigh with emotion. It's really worthy of being the top power of the Jinling Great Base, inherited for 100 years down the line. The heritage is truly amazing. And let's not talk about those heavenly treasures and resources, just these 20 or so martial arts alone are precious. Since the great change of heaven and earth, it has only been 200 years so far. Although there were many human martial artists, there were very few martial arts created. This also led to any martial art being extremely valuable. As in the case of the Sioux family, which had stood at the Jinling Grand Base for 100 years, it had only managed to accumulate more than 20 bronze-level martial arts, 3 silver-level martial arts and 1 gold-level martial arts. This is evident after some emotion. Seeing that all the supplies had been scavenged by himself, Chu Mo was ready to leave. Just then. Instead, he suddenly saw a small structure on the other side of the mountain range as well. The building isn't very big. There is only one main hall and a few huts. Both the main hall and the hut are all constructed with the whole piece of lapis lazuli, which looks as one, as if it was made in heaven. Instead, the outside of the building was surrounded by a set of defense formations that didn't seem to want to let anyone in. Why is such an area laid out in the Sioux clan's secret realm? There was some curiosity in Chu Mo's heart. So then his body flashed and quickly swept over. Soon. He then came to the neighborhood. It was only then that he could see that the buildings surrounded by the formation, although they looked brand new, they all exuded a stale aura, vaguely transmitting a trace of longevity. The building within the formation seems to be an ancient relic. Why doesn't the Sioux family explore it? Instead they have to set up a formation to surround it. Some surprise arose in Chu Mo's heart. Think about it. He decided to go in and explore. Although the formation outside was brilliant, Chu Mo's strength could easily break it. He then stepped inside. As you can see, the courtyard of this building does not have a door, and you can see inside just from the outside, which is paved with green stone slabs. On the left and right sides of the entrance to the small courtyard, there were 2 stone lions, raising their heads and opening their mouths, seemingly roaring at the sky. After gazing carefully, Chu Mo cautiously walked into the small courtyard. And just as he was about to step into the courtyard, he suddenly felt an extremely heavy pressure coming over him, seemingly blocking him from entering. In the meantime, a bright yellow light suddenly surfaced above the heads of the stone lions on both sides. Spin. From this light, an invisible sharp blade shot out, stabbing towards Chu Mo and directly drilling into his violet mansion. This is mental attack. Chu Mo recognized him at the first moment. However, he did not tense up, but closed his eyes and sank his spirit into the violet mansion. Buzz. The spirit blade fell into Chu Mo's purple mansion and chopped on his yuan shin. However, it did not cause any damage, but dissolved into nothingness in an instant. Ever since Chu Mo took the soul yuan fetus and condensed the yuan shin, ordinary spiritual attacks had been useless to him. The sound of this stone lion's spiritual attack seemed quite loud, but it wasn't very powerful. It was so that it was simply unable to cause damage to Chu Mo's yuan shin. Buzz. 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 Next. Another invisible spiritual sharp edge stabbed in, transforming into a sharp sword, flying needles, long knives, and even long spears, and chopping towards Chu Mo's yuan shin in the meantime. Within his violet mansion, the yuan shin was suspended in mid-air, with a circle of golden light emanating from its surroundings, firmly protecting the yuan shin in the center, allowing the many sharp blades to chop it up, and in addition to setting off a wave of ripples, it was unable to cause any trauma. Boom! At this point, the heads of the 2 stone lions suddenly each condensed a dark, sharp blade that chopped out towards Chu Mo's yuan shin. Zhen. Inside the violet mansion, the yuan shin suddenly opened his eyes, and a circle of even more dazzling golden light emanated from his body. The black sharp blade instantly landed on the golden light, and there was a clang sound of gold and iron, followed by the sharp blade breaking and dissolving into nothingness. And the 2 stone lions shattered with a bang at this point. Chu Mo then realized that the obstruction in front of him had disappeared and he could walk into the courtyard very smoothly. This stone lion, it seems more like a test. The only person who can enter the courtyard is the one who blocks the mental attack. Chu Mo thought darkly in his heart. And in the meantime, he also had some guesses about the Sioux family's move to set up formations outside. Could it be that the Sioux family had also sent people to try to explore, only that no one was able to carry through the stone lion's spiritual attack from start to finish, and thus had no choice but to set up a formation to seal this relic? When this thought surfaced in his mind, Chu Mo could then almost conclude that this was the truth of the matter. Otherwise, why would the Su family need to use a formation to seal this compound? Wouldn't that be redundant? I guess when the Su family sealed this compound, that sense of suffocation of obviously sitting on a mountain of treasure but not being able to obtain it should be very strong, right? He couldn't help but shake his head and laugh at the thought subsequently. Step inside. Chapter 138 Great Diffusion Godly Monarch, Great Diffusion Divine Light Secret Code. The courtyard is not large. The only other tree was a thick crooked tree that had lost all its leaves. There is a stone table and 3 stone benches under the tree. At first glance, there is nothing unusual about it. Chimo scanned the room, then raised his steps toward the house. The house was also extremely empty. Only in the center area, there was a futon on which a skeleton sat cross-legged. This body has been here for who knows how long. The bones were golden in color, emitting a faint luster under the sunlight, while there was also a faint pressure coming from them. The bones are golden in color, and the pressure is so grand that it's even stronger than that divine sword sect defender that we saw in Little Leafy Green Sky back then. I think I was at least a powerful person of the King Seal realm before I died. Chimo thought darkly. Then moving his gaze to look around carefully, soon he realized that on the table next to him, there was a small jade tripod. 3 feet and 2 ears, about a foot or so tall, more like an incense burner, though the body was crystal clear, with a thick and deep one look, and you know it's extraordinary. Chu Mo moved over, raised his hand and took the jade tripod in his hand, scrutinized it carefully, and didn't see anything unusual. So he tentatively poured in some yuan qi. Buzz. Suddenly, the jade tripod trembled slightly, and then a golden light was born from it, as if it was an aurora borealis, and instantly disappeared into Chu Mo's mind. Suddenly encountering such a strange situation, Chu Mo's face had just surfaced in shock when he realized that this golden light was not malicious towards him, but instead, it flowed out a stream of golden words that were branded on top of his yuan shin. This is soul-piercing divine light? When Chu Mo scanned the golden text in his mind, he realized that it was actually a set of feats. And it was an extremely special and precious yuan mysterious method. Soul-stabbing divine light. Only martial artists who possessed the yuan shin could cultivate it, and once successfully practiced, they would be able to use the yuan shin to harness the divine light and attack the enemy's soul yuan shin under the divine light. If the enemy's yuan shin or soul was weak, it would be instantly annihilated, becoming a walking corpse without a soul. Horrible. After learning of the terrifying nature of this set of techniques, even Chu Mo could not help but be shaken in his mind. But then, a flash of excitement appeared on his face. Such a powerful technique was now obtained by him, and if he could successfully cultivate it out, he would have the method of yuan shin against the enemy in the future. In the future, if one encountered a strong enemy and suddenly cast it out in a pinch, even if one could not annihilate the enemy's soul or yuan shin, the divine light was enough to cause damage to the enemy's yuan shin under the vertical and horizontal light. In this way, the enemy would inevitably have a breakthrough, thus allowing Chu Mo to gain the upper hand. Any kind of yuan mysteries are extremely precious. I've never heard of even the most ordinary yuan mysterious technique in the Jinling Great Base, and such a subtle secret technique is actually recorded here. This set of secret techniques alone is worth a fortune. Chu Mo subconsciously tightened his grip on the jade tripod and murmured. At this very moment. In Chu Mo's mind, any gains obtained from entering this secret realm this time, even if they were added together, would not be able to compare to this soul-piercing divine light. He had no doubt. If the news of this secret method were to spread out, I'm afraid that the entire Blue Star's powerhouses would go crazy over it. Phew. Taking a long sigh of relief, Chu Mo pressed back his inner upheaval, then placed the jade cauldron precious in his carry-on space and carefully preserved it. After receiving this jade tripod, there was nothing else in the room. Chu Mo looked around the room and finally landed his gaze on the bones of the corpse. I stumbled into this place by chance and was given the soul-stabbing divine light secret method. Although I don't know Senior's name, I would like to thank you for the grace of passing on the method. After saying that, Chumo respectfully bowed. Chumo then found some precious wood from within his carry-on space and made a small coffin, preparing to place this corpse inside so that it could be buried in the ground. After all, after getting his inheritance, Chumo is not good enough to let him expose his body under 100 days. However, just as Chumo had just placed the bones in the coffin, suddenly a divine light flew out of the corpse's mind. Then in midair, the silhouette of an old man with a pale, immortal appearance appeared. He looked around him and resumed his gaze on Chumo and laughed aloud. "Young man, I didn't expect that you would still have such good intentions of wanting to put me in the ground." Seeing this situation, Chumo's mind was greatly shaken, and the pupils in his eyes contracted even more dramatically. Could it be that this old man actually come to life? Seemingly sensing Chumo's thoughts, the old man smiled and said, "I'm already dead. This is just an obsession that the old man left behind during his lifetime, in order to find my successor. I see that you have already cultivated the Yuan Shen, so I'm sure you've already seen the soul-stabbing divine light in that jade cauldron. In reality, that soul-stabbing divine light is only the mutilated version. If the later did not move my corpse, naturally, they can only cultivate the mutilated version. But if they moved my corpse and plotted against me." Speaking of which, the old man smiled. However, Chumo's heart flinched as he understood the meaning of the unfinished words. If he was plotting against him, he would naturally not have a good ending. But that's just a means of last resort, to prevent the secret method from being grasped by people with bad intentions. If it's possible, the old man would very much like to be able to keep the inheritance from being cut off after he dies. Fortunately, although your descendant is not considered to be a person with a pristine mind, he also has some bottom line to adhere to, and is considered to be the most favorable legacy of the old man. Old me will now pass on the complete soul-stabbing divine light to you. Say it." The old man pointed his finger at Chumo, and a spiritual light went straight into Chumo's mind. An even more vast and complicated message was then branded on top of his Yuan Shen. After doing that, Chumo was able to clearly see that the old man's silhouette had dimmed a bit more. However, the other party seemed to have accomplished some sort of task, showing a look of relief. He looked at Chumo and spoke, "Since you have obtained my complete inheritance, you are qualified to know the name of the old man. My name is Great Diffusion Divine Sovereign, and I have been running across the heavenly vault for 100,000 years, and I am renowned, especially for my self-created famous skill, the Great Diffusion Divine Light, which is even more prestigious in the heavenly vault, and kills foreign races with fear and trepidation." It is a pity that the old man was still too sharp after all, so much so that he was jealously guarded by the foreign tribes, and was inadvertently ambushed, and although he exerted all his strength to kill more than a dozen of the foreign tribe's strongest men, he was still seriously injured after all, and had no choice but to cast a secret technique to escape, and eventually came here, and could only live on. Saying these words, in the first half of the paragraph, the old man's eyes showed the color of remembrance, and his words were full of arrogance, showing all the grandeur instead. In the second half, the tone is low and rather heroic. The old man knew that he would not be long for this world, so he left his legacy before he died, with only 2 wishes. For one thing, I can find a good disciple so that my mastery will not be lost. Secondly, I hope that those who come after us will not forget the bloodshed of our forefathers, and will behead the remnants of the foreign races, and open up a place of survival for our human race. Say it." He glanced at Chumo and sighed, "That's just it, this is still a bit too far for you. With that said, I hope you will treasure." When he said that, the old man's silhouette dissipated. As for Chumo, at this moment, his heart had long since set off shockwaves because of the old man's words. Although the Great Diffusion Godly Monarch didn't reveal much information within his words, but still, it brought one question after another to Chumo's mind. What realm is a divine monarch? And where is the vault of heaven? Could it be the stars, beyond the blue star? What does it mean to kill the remnants of the foreign races and open up a place for the human race to survive? Is it hard to believe that the strongest people of the human race are still fighting with the foreign races? Is their battlefield in the stars? One question after another flashed through his mind. At the same time, Chu Mo again suddenly recalled the scene that he had seen back then on the little leaf-green sky divine sword sex questioning heart road. Countless human powerhouses fought with those ancient gods and demons that were so tall that they were able to stand on top of the sky, golden blood filled the air, and the battlefield was filled with broken limbs and arms. The ferocious beasts that were as high as heaven and earth roared up to the sky, and the terrifying birds were able to cover the sky with a spread of their wings. The stars all fell for them under their breath. These scenes, at first, Chu Mo only thought that they were the images that the questioning heart path purposely displayed in order to test martial artists. But listening to the words of the great diffusion godly monarch, it forced a speculation to surface in Chu Mo's mind. These scenes. Could it be a scene that has happened before? It's hard not to. In this endless starry universe beyond the blue star, humans are still fighting with foreign races? Chu Mo raised his head and looked up at the sky, unable to help but think darkly. Have to say. The information revealed in the great diffusion godly monarch's words caused Chu Mo's mind to suffer a great shock. So much so that it messed with his mind. But soon, all these thoughts were then dispelled from him. He understood very well that these were by no means comprehensible to his immediate self. Even if you know the truth, what can you do? With his current strength, it was just adding to his troubles in vain. The first order of business is to build up strength. When the strength is strong enough, no matter what kind of situation you will face, you can naturally break it and solve it. Thinking so, Chu Mo then eliminated these thoughts from his mind and instead dropped his mind on the gongfu that the great diffusion god sovereign had passed on to him. The complete chapter of the soul-stabbing divine light was titled The Great Diffraction Divine Light Mysteries. Compared to the soul-stabbing divine light, it was much more refined and at the same time more powerful. In addition to being able to allow the Yuan Shen to condense the great diffusion divine light to fight against the enemy, it was also possible to cultivate the secret scripture and quench the Yuan Shen, making the Yuan Shen more and more sturdy and strong. This is extremely scary. It's well known. Everyone's soul could not be actively quenched, and only relied on the elevation of the realm to get a slight increase, even if they had condensed their Yuan Shen. And this great diffractive divine light mysteries could actually quench the Yuan Shen. Doesn't that mean? Can the Genjutsu also gradually strengthen with cultivation? Thinking of this, Chu Mo's eyes suddenly brightened. To be able to create such a subtle and incomparable secret method, I think that this great diffusion godly monarch must be in existence of great strength and its power. And strong beyond my imagination. Chu Mo thought darkly. Although the great diffusion divine sovereign's power was horrifying to him, Chu Mo was not discouraged. He knows his own self, who possessed the gathering technique, would become such a strong person in time. Even this is far from the end of him. Chapter 139, Condensing the Yuanshan Golden Wheel, Exalted Auction. After burying the great diffusion godly monarch, Chu Mo carefully explored the compound again to make sure that he hadn't missed anything, and then left from the secret realm. Half an hour later, in a quiet room within the Tianji Pavilion, Chu Mo sat cross-legged. He was preparing to cultivate the great diffusion divine light secret code. This secret law contained means of attacking the Yuan Shen, means of defense, and methods of cultivation. The Yuan Shen was fundamental, and if one was able to continuously upgrade the grade of the Yuan Shen, it would allow the martial artist to obtain countless unexpected benefits. And if one mastered the means of attack and the means of Yuan Shen protection, one would be able to attack the enemy's Yuan Shen while not having to be afraid of the opponent's Yuan Shen attack enough to be invincible. Thinking this way, without hesitation, Chu Mo directly immersed his mind into the Violet Mansion and began to manipulate the Yuan Shen, cultivating in accordance with the method recorded in the Great Diffusion Divine Light Mysterious Code. Accompanied by cultivation, Chu Mo only felt as if his Yuan Shen had been nourished in some way, exuding one arcane aura after another to the extreme. In the meantime, in the Violet Mansion, the Yuan Shen was even emitting a circle of extremely bright golden light, illuminating the entire Violet Mansion in a clear and transparent manner. Buzz. 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 Over time, Chu Mo could feel that his Yuan Shen was continuously solidifying and becoming stronger and stronger. And the golden light in the Violet Mansion intensified. Time rushed by, and in the blink of an eye 20 days had passed this day. Buzz. In Chu Mo's Violet Mansion, the golden light had flourished to the extreme, and other than the golden light, almost no other colors could be seen anymore. The radiant light even shone through the Violet Mansion and into the house, reflecting a golden light all over the house. Phew. Suck. Phew. Suck. The golden light was contracting and expanding, just like a person's breath. After a long time, the brilliant light finally disappeared, and in its place a golden circle of light appeared behind Chu Mo's Yuanshan brain. To condense a circle of Yuanshan's golden wheel means that the Great Diffusion Divine Light Mysterious Canon has been cultivated to begin with. Upon seeing this golden wheel of light, Chu Mo opened his eyes and couldn't help but let out a long breath. The Yuanshan golden wheel was the mutation that arose after the Yuanshan had condensed to a realm. It was just like a golden wheel made from the convergence of merits, possessing extremely incredible means. If one encountered a spiritual attack, the golden wheel could be used as a means of defense, blocking all secret arts that attacked on the Yuanshan. And if you want to attack, it also allows the golden wheel to transform into the Great Diffusion Divine Light, annihilating the enemy's soul. It can be used in many wonderful ways. The Great Diffusion Divine Light Mysterious Code, it's easy to get started, but it's extremely difficult to be profound. For a short period of time, only the golden wheel can be condensed, possessing a certain amount of Yuanshan offensive and defensive power. The next step is the need for constant nourishment and tempering, and slow enhancement. Chu Mo thought darkly. He then took out a golden order from within his carry space. The True Dragon Roars. As a gold-level sound wave martial skill, the True Dragon Roar was not only powerful, but also extremely stealthy, making it difficult to guard against. Caught off guard, it is easy to catch the enemy off guard, thus playing an extremely important role in the fight. Start practicing. After carefully reading through the main points of the technique, Chu Mo then began to cultivate as a gold-level martial skill. It was extremely difficult for ordinary martial artists to cultivate it successfully. But for Chu Mo, it was a breeze. 3 days later, he had then grasped the know-how and managed to cultivate the True Dragon Roar into the gate. Try how powerful it is. Chu Mo came out of his seclusion and couldn't wait to try it out. The room was too small, and performing a sound wave martial art was bound to move quite a bit, easily causing panic. So Trummer planned to go into the wild. Half an hour later, he had then arrived at a field thousands of miles away from the Besites, a dense forest. There were quite a few low-level ferocious beasts inside, and standing inside, one could vaguely hear the roars of ferocious beasts coming from here and there. Just take these ferocious beasts and try their power, Trummer thought. After that, he then directly operated the True Dragon Roar. Accompanied by the chi and blood being run open steeply, a majestic power instantly filled the entire body. Right at that moment, Chu Mo opened his mouth violently and inhaled violently, then blasted out. Chant. A majestic dragon roar exploded steeply, appearing as if a true dragon had descended into the world. Boom boom boom. On the earth, a sound of explosion immediately rang out. Pft. 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 Accompanied by the resounding dragon's roar, the ferocious beasts within a radius of more than 10 miles all had their brains buzzing and their eyes blazing almost instantly, and then their eyes rolled over and they were no longer moving. Chu Mo dispersed his spiritual power and was able to clearly see that within a range of more than 10 miles, along with the sound waves reverberation, the flying birds in the sky directly fell down. The beasts on the ground flopped to the ground with it. In the meantime, surrounding trees and plants immediately have exploded open, soil and stone, sand and dust are steeply lifted, as if the land was plowed by something, a time of smoke and dust. After a long time, the smoke cleared. With Chu Mo as the center, within 5 miles around, it was clean. There was no longer anything in sight that could still stand. And 5 miles away, it was as if it had been swept by a gale, and had become very messy. Terrible. Is this the power of a true dragon roar? Looking at the power he had caused, Chumo could not help but show a look of shock on his face. He walked up to a grade 2 ferocious beast and carefully observed it. It was discovered that although the appearance of this grade 2 ferocious beast appeared to be undamaged, the internal organs and even the musculoskeletal bones within the skin had all been shattered. With a light touch, it was completely reduced to pieces. It's really worthy of being a gold-level martial skill. It's really extremely terrifying. If it is used against the enemy, it will certainly be able to catch the enemy off guard and make it difficult for them to stand alone. Trummer nodded. He was very satisfied with the power of the true dragon's roar. Returning to the base, Chumo had wanted to find Qin Shiwei for a chat, but realized that she was in closed-door cultivation, so he dismissed the idea. He went to the Tianji pavilion again and found that it was also running well under Chasing Wind's care. With nothing to do, Chumo decided to continue his closed-door cultivation. Right now, his strength tends to grow steadily. Every day he can grow more than 30 elephant power, a month will be able to increase 1,000 elephant power, a year will be able to increase tens of thousands of elephant power. If this speed were to spread out, it would definitely shock countless martial artists. Chumo was also quite satisfied with this. Beyond that, he currently had the Great Diffusion Divine Light Mysteries plus the True Dragon Roar to cultivate. But the former is not something that can be significantly improved overnight. And it's not like True Dragon Roar needs urgent boosting. After thinking about it, Chumo still decided to cultivate the Dragon Image Undying Scripture first. Although he had already broken the first flesh body extreme realm, making it possible for his strength to increase by 200 times, however, with Chumo's current talent, under multiple superimpositions, it definitely exceeded the upper limit of 200 times. This also meant that his strength still couldn't be fully utilized. Continue cultivating the Dragon Elephant Undying Scripture, and strive to break the second physical body extreme realm as soon as possible. With that thought, Chumo took out a violet gold creation pill from within his carry-on space. This was an elixir obtained from within the Divine Sword Sextan furnace. For cultivating the Dragon Image Imperishable Scripture, it was able to provide a great increase in effect. And because it was a 5 orifices pill, the medicinal effect was 5 times more enhanced than the ordinary purple gold creation pill, and it did not have any poison. The elixir enters the mouth. It immediately turned into a stream of pure energy that escaped and flowed into the limbs and bones. Without the slightest bit of slowness, Chumo directly operated the Dragon Elephant Imperishable Scripture, quenching his fleshly body. It's hard to know how long it's been. Chumo slowly opened his eyes. The 5 orifices purple gold creation pill is really strong. Under its aids, it has only been cultivated for just 10 days, and it's even better than comparing it to my usual 6 months of cultivation of the Dragon Elephant Imperishable Scripture. But taking an elixir takes 10 days to completely digest. The efficiency is a bit slow. Chumhum frowned slightly. But soon his brow relaxed. Pills are slow to digest, so you can take celestial treasures to speed up the progress. Chumo had obtained so many treasures from the little leaf green sky, and with the resources worth more than 70 billion yuan stones that he had obtained from destroying the Su clan, it could be said that the last thing he lacked right now was heavenly treasures. Thinking so, directly from within his carry-on space, he found a spiritual liquid that could accelerate the effects of the medicine and drank it in one gulp. He then swallowed a violet gold creation pill once again. Shasta. Chumo then felt an extremely pure medicinal power rapidly exerting itself within his body, causing him to nod his head in satisfaction. He then closed his eyes once again and guided the medicinal power to quench his flesh. Time flows slowly. This day, Chumo was in the middle of his seclusion when he suddenly sensed something and couldn't help but open his eyes. And almost simultaneously, a respectful voice came from outside. Pavilion Master, subordinate Chasing Wind seeks an audience. Enter. Chu Mo said in a faint voice soon. Chasing Wind walked in and saluted Chu Mo. Anything? Chummer asked. Pavilion Master, previously you gave me the responsibility of selling half of the Su family's stores, and now that we've completed the delivery with the major powers, we've gotten a total of 36 billion yuan stones and resources worth of yuan stones. Here's the list, and I'd like to ask the Pavilion Master to inspect it. With that, Wind Chaser handed over a list. Chu Mo brought it and carefully scanned it to make sure there were no omissions, and then nodded with satisfaction. Well done, you've worked hard. It's what my subordinates should do. Chaser said. Then after a pause, he added, by the way, Miss Mo Shanshan from the Jade Merchant Alliance came to see you yesterday. Miss Mo is looking for me? Is something the matter? Chu Mo asked with some surprise. It says that the Great Base of Jinling and the other 4 nearby Great Bases are joining forces, and that the 5 Great Bases Exalted auction that takes place once every 5 years is going to be held in the next month, so they've come to ask the Pavilion Master if he intends to take part in it. Chaser said. An exalted auction of the 5 bases? A flash of interest appeared in Chu Mo's eyes. If it was an ordinary auction, with the heavenly treasures and resources he possessed now, there was naturally no need to participate. However, an auction at the Zuni level might show quite a few treasures. After thinking about it, Chu Mo said, reply to Miss Mo and say that I will participate. Yes. Chaser nodded. Then seeing that Chu Mo had no other orders, he respectfully retired. Chapter 140 Sword Spirit Fruit, Auction Opening. 1 day later. The Jade Merchant Alliance then sent an invitation to the auction, which stated the time and location of the auction as well as the auction process. First, the Jade Merchant Alliance would take out some treasures for auction, which would be bid on by numerous Zunis. The next step is for the many honored ones to trade with each other. During their transaction, the entire time was private, with no other people watching, which could ensure privacy between the 8 desolate exalted. Beyond that, on the invitation, there was also a list of treasures that the Jade Merchant Alliance intended to release. Chu Mo carefully looked around and realized that there were indeed quite a few really good things. 10,000-year-old quality spirit ginseng, spirit fruits that could slightly increase the chances of a Sifengjin general breaking through to the 8 desolate exalted realm. There was also the top-level Yuan power cultivation secret art, and the spirit drawing art that he had just obtained from the Kraken on to the final finale lot. Chu Mo even saw gold-level martial arts. However, the invitation did not describe the exact name of this gold-level martial skill, but rather covered it up. It must have been a deliberate act by the Jade Merchant Alliance to mobilize the emotions of the exalted. And one of the most noteworthy. Chu Mo also saw a treasure called the Blade Spirit Fruit. The introduction said that this kind of treasure was able to increase a martial artist's sword cultivation talent by a small margin. Gotta have it. Upon seeing this description, Chu Mo's breathing suddenly became violently ragged. Nowadays, Chu Mo's main means of killing was the sword technique, but the embarrassing thing was that his sword technique cultivation talent was only advanced, and it was already severely unable to keep up with his pace. Chu Mo also wanted to find a way to raise his sword talent up, but he never had a clue, and now that such a blade spirit fruit had appeared, it could never be spared. 1 month. Looking at the time when the auction would be held just a month later, Chu Mo secretly clenched his fists. At this very moment. He was looking forward to this auction at the moment. The exalted auction of the 5 bases was held every 5 years. Instead, the locations and hosts rotate among 5 large bases. This year, it was the turn of the Jinling Big Base, hosted as usual by the Jade Merchant Alliance. 1 month later. Chu Mo arrived at the headquarters of the Jade Merchant Alliance at the Jinling Grand Base, which was where this auction was being held. Just come to the door. It was seen that in front of the Merchant Alliance's headquarters, it had been put under martial law, with numerous Zhongshu and even Jingong-level martial artists in charge of the security of this auction, making sure that there wouldn't be any slip-ups. Venerable Chu. I saw Venerable Chu. Oh my god, Venerable Chu is so handsome. I didn't expect Venerable Chu to actually come over as well. When Chu Mo arrived here, the nearby martial artists were in an uproar, and then they all came forward and greeted him respectfully. Some female martial artists, on the other hand, even shouted excitedly with admiration in their eyes. His arrival caused a bit of a stir. Everyone looked at Chu Mo with respect in their gazes. Although Chu Mo was not yet a true 8 Desolate Exalted, he was able to kill 2 of the Su families exalted in a row with the realm of the 4 directions Jin General, and such strength completely conquered the group of martial artists at the Jinling Great Beseats safe to say. Nowadays, Chu Mo was considered to be the most popular martial artist within the large base of Jinling. Countless young martial artists idolized him. Noteworthy. It's been a while. Along with the news of Tianji Pavilion absorbing martial artists circulating more widely, the martial artists within the base had many casual martial artists wanting to join in when they learned that this was Chu Mo's power. So much so that the Tianji Pavilion already had thousands of martial artists in a short period of time. This was still a case of chasing the wind, being strict and preferring the lack of a good thing to the lack of a good thing. If he had been a little more lax, I'm afraid that there would have been at least thousands of martial artists in the Tianji Pavilion today. Welcome Venerable Chu, the auction is about to start, let me take you up. At this time a pretty-looking female sales clerk with a Zhongsher cultivation level walked over and said with a sweet smile. With pleasure. Chu Mo nodded and handed the invitation to the other party, before following her all the way towards the top floor. When Chu Mo arrived at the top floor hall, he realized that there were already quite a few martial artists here and there, all of them contained a powerful aura, and each of them was at the 8 Desolate Zun realm. At the moment either they are sitting in their seats and waiting quietly, or 3 or 2 of them are gathered together and whispering. Venerable Chu, you're here. At this point, when Gutsong and the old ancestors of the other 2 families, Shen and Zhou, in the hall saw Chu Mo, they immediately greeted him with smiles. Trummer nodded and exchanged pleasantries with them. At this time, there were 4 other large base Zunis in the hall, and at the beginning when Chu Mo came over, they saw that he was nothing more than a Jin general level of cultivation, and thought that he was their young back. However, looking at Gutsong's 3 people talking to Chu Mo, in their words, they were just like treating him as a strong person of the same level, and even carried a touch of faintly undetectable flattery and respect, which immediately made them a bit puzzled. 3-8 Wastelands Venerable Masters, actually treating a 4 Directions town general with such respect? What's this young man's story? Venerable Gutsong, who is this? An unfamiliar 8 Desolate Exalt walked over and spoke out inquiringly. Venerable Tsong Yuan, let me introduce you. Seeing the visitor's inquiry, Gutsong hurriedly pointed at Chu Mo and said, this is our Jinling Big Base, Tianji Pavilion Master Chu Mo. Don't look at the cultivation level of just the 4 squares in general now, but there has been a battle record of killing 2 honored ones in one day, the strength, and its strength is so strong that it's called by the name of Honored One. What? Hearing Gutsong's words, Venerable Tsong Yuan immediately had a look of incredulity on his face. A Jin general martial artist was actually able to kill 2 exalted ones? It's just not possible. He subconsciously wanted to retort, but then he violently seemed to realize something. Wait. Venerable Tsong Yuan's face wore a look of disbelief and incomparable shock as he said, those 2 venerables that Venerable Chu decapitated, they couldn't be the Su clan ancestor and Su Lang, right? The words came out. It immediately caused some of the surrounding Zunis to bet their gazes over, with a look of astonishment and shock in their eyes. As one of the 4 major families in the Jinling large base, the Su family had a notable popularity, which was why after they were overthrown, the news had also spread to some of the nearby medium and large bases. Therefore, they had also heard of the news of the Su family's destruction. However, because the distance between each of the large bases was so great, they only knew that both the Su clan's oldest ancestor and Su Lang, the Su clan's family head who had just been promoted to the rank of 8 Desolate Exalted, had been decapitated. Exactly who killed them is unknown. But listening to Gutsong's words made all of them set off shock waves in their hearts. Could it be that the one who killed the Su clan's ancestor and Su Lang was actually this young Jin general in front of him? This is just unbelievable. A Jin general martial artist can actually decapitate a Zunshur? There's a heavenly gap between a Jin general and an exalted. It's simply difficult to cross, it's almost impossible to do. What's more, that Su family's old ancestor has been entering the exalted realm for decades, and is said to be on the verge of entering the middle stage of the Eight Wastelands exalted realm, actually still being decapitated. Unbelievable. It's unbelievable. With the body of a Jin general, decapitating a Zunshur powerhouse, it's truly fearful for the future generations. There was a lot of talk around. The eyes of the many Zunis looking at Chu Mo were filled with shock, scrutiny, disbelief, and incredulity. And some faintly unrecognizable fear. Only at the Jin general realm, he was able to kill 2 Zunis in one day, and one of them was also the Su clan's ancestor who had entered the Jin general realm for several decades, so what kind of terrifying talent was this? And if he waited for him to enter the 8 desolate exalted realm, how powerful would he be? Feeling the lines of sight betting on the surroundings, Chu Mo did not feel any nervous discomfort. If it was when he was weak, I'm afraid he would still be worried about exposing his talent. But to this day, with his strength, he didn't have to worry about encountering any dangers even if he displayed his strong talent. Because he was already powerful enough to make any 8 desolate exalt need to pay attention and not dare to have crooked thoughts about him. That was why Chu Mo was very open to chatting and exchanging pleasantries with these Zunis, with a calm and unhurried demeanor. This caused quite a few Zunis to secretly nod their heads. The appraisal of Tremor was taken to the next level. Over time, the number of 8 Wastelands exalted masters arriving was also increasing. In the blink of an eye, more than 30 Zunis had gathered in the hall, which were the number of all the Zunis from the 5 large bases, including the Jinling large base. Another moment passed. With all the participating Zunis present, the door to this floor closed with a bang, and then a formation rose up, enveloping the place. See this scene. Everyone stopped chatting and took their seats. The auction had officially begun. The auctioneer was a female martial artist of late Jin general cultivation. She wore an elegant red dress, her appearance was exquisite and her figure was alluring. If she were placed in the outside world, it would be enough to attract countless gazes and become the center of attention in the eyes of everyone. Here, however, she was reduced to a mere accompaniment. After a short opening, the auctioneer raised his hand and the first lot was brought up by the waitress. First lot, 12,000-year-old quality purple wood spirit ginseng. I don't need to tell you how valuable and useful it is, just the fact that it is of such a vintage speaks volumes. The starting bid is $23 million in stones. The auctioneer opened the jade box, revealing a purple ginseng, which carried a rich and extremely spiritual nature, which could not help but invigorate one's spirit even just by smelling it from afar. Any spiritual fruits and herbs, once they had reached a certain age, would possess some kind of incredible effect. The 10,000-year-old purple wood spirit ginseng, even more so, contains a huge amount of vitality, enough to make the living dead flesh and bones. Even if there is only one breath left, it can be swallowed and quickly recovered. It could be said that this was almost tantamount to allowing martial artists to have a second life. Its importance cannot be overstated, and although the 8 Wastelands' venerable masters were powerful, they ultimately needed to kill, so if they could be equipped with such a spirit ginseng, it would be the same as having a great guarantee when they killed. It's too. The atmosphere in the hall instantly boiled over. Many Zunis were eager to try. Chumo's heart was also stirred. But then he shook his head. A 12,000-year-old purple wood spirit ginseng is indeed effective, but I can't use it. He had a wood attribute talent and was fully capable of restoring and healing, and was not very dependent on such treasures. And there were quite a few similar treasures within his carry-on space. Although Chu Mo did not desire it, other martial artists needed it. After all, not every martial artist possessed the talent of the wood attribute. So the prices are climbing.